Hey guys, so today we're going to be doing an introduction to JavaScript. Now, this introduction is geared towards complete beginners, so if you do know JavaScript, you can either watch this for a review, or you don't have to watch it, you can leave anytime. So, if you guys haven't worked with any other programming languages, JavaScript is going to be the first one you're actually learning. Because this is because HTML and CSS aren't technically considered programming languages. They're usually denoted as markup coding languages because they don't require a ton of logic. So you'll see soon as we progress through JavaScript, it does get more logical and there's a lot of thought required as opposed to HTML and CSS, which are more hierarchical. But yeah, it's a fun language to work with. So yeah, let's talk about some core fundamentals and principles. So the first thing I want you guys to know about is called the console. The console is the console can be used sort of like the terminal is. A lot of times it is that. We can print things out to the console and just understand the values of certain things as a developer. So here, look what I mean. So we can type console.log and then print the number 5. And you can see that right here in your console, the number 5 is printed. We are logging 5 to the console. And we could do this with numbers like 6.5, and then a few keywords, such as true and false. Oh. Now, let's all try typing our name into the console. So let's see what happens when we type our name. Alright, so we're getting a reference error. It's saying that your name is not defined. This is because nowhere in our program does JavaScript understand what this means. JavaScript already has logic to identify what the word true means and what the number 5 means, but it doesn't know this name. So, if we want the console to print it even though it doesn't know it and just print it anyways, then we have to put this in quotation marks. So whenever you're typing a word or a phrase or letters that aren't keywords in JavaScript, you're gonna need to embed them in quotation marks because these quotation marks tell JavaScript to print out whatever is inside them, literally print that out. No interpretation, no logic, just print out this exactly. So then when you run your code, your name should be printed out. Okay. So you can keep that or change it, whatever you want. Now, there's also, the console can do some arithmetics for us. So we can type console.log and then do things such as 5 plus 1, 8 divided by 2, 8 times 2, and 8 minus 2. So obviously there's other operators you could use, but these are definitely the most common ones. Now, something also to note is that the console, we could put numbers inside quotation marks. But if we did that, and then we wanted to add 8 plus 1, and we did that in quotation marks, we are just going to get 81, and you could also tell it's not that color that numbers are. And we'll go over also a little bit more about this in a few minutes. But yeah. Oh, and then also one thing I want to mention, in JavaScript, there's sort of a debate over whether developers use semicolons or not. So right now, it's really up to you whether or not you want to use them. What you have to do though is pick a side and be consistent with it. So if you use semicolons, if you want to use semicolons, use them throughout your code and on every line. Because you just need to be consistent and be more readable. I don't use semicolons, so you won't see them in my code really right now. But yeah, definitely pick a side and just stick with it. Okay. Now let's talk about variables. So a variable is sort of like you can store a piece of information in a variable name and then reference that piece of information throughout your code only with the variable name. So let me show you what a variable sort of looks like. var name equals Lindsay. Right here, I'm declaring the variable with the keyword var. So var name is the declaration, and then I'm performing an initialization by setting it equal to the string Lindsay. Then, say I wanted to reference this later on. If I want to reference it, I'm just going to reference it as name. I don't include this var here because the var is only for creating variables. It's not for referencing them later on. To reference them later on, you only use the name of the variable, which in this case is name. So when you console that, you should see your name printed out. And also, let's look at this. So we can declare the variable and then initialize it, and we could also give it a new value. So I could type name equals and then give it a new value of like Alyssa. And then so let's console.log the name now. Okay, so you can see here the name is first Lindsay and then it's Alyssa. I gave name a new value and then I console.logged that and you could see it got that new value. But it didn't change the new value before in the code. So a big reason why we use variables is because we don't want to keep remembering pieces of information. Like, look, I might be typing out in my website multiple times, hey username, like hey Lindsay, multiple times in my website. I don't want to have to remember that piece of information and or retrieve it every single time. What I can do is just store the user's name in a variable name and then reference console.log name throughout the program. Okay. So let's go over a few other types of variables now. So we can also set a variable age and set that equal to a number. Now you can see the number is also a different color than the string. So let's console.log age, and then let's set another variable. So you can call this one great developer, and you can set it equal to true or false. We'll all set it equal to true though. And then let's console.log great developer. This is called Camel Case. The way that I named this variable is called Camel Case in JavaScript. You can see that the second word in the variable, the first letter of the second word is capitalized. So this is what Camel Case looks like. So the very first word, the first letter isn't capitalized. Every single word after that, the first letter is capitalized. So this is just a best practice, a convention in JavaScript that most developers follow. And you want to do that because it's just important for readability and clean code and as a best practice. Okay. So let's run our variables, and you see that now we have like different types. We have 50, we have true, etc. And also one cool thing, you might not use this too often, you can see the type of variable that your variables are. So if I ran type of before everything, you see string, number, boolean. So this is a string because it's wrapped in quotations. This is a number because it's a number and it's not wrapped in quotations. And this is a boolean because it has the value of either true or false. Okay, and look, also, if I set this to like a capital true, it's something different. It is no longer that color, it's no longer that boolean. So we have to make sure we're very careful with how we use keywords in JavaScript because true does not equal true. It's a case-sensitive language, meaning that capital letters are a whole different character than lowercase letters. All right, now let's talk about concatenation. So concatenation is sort of how we combine different data types and variables and such in JavaScript. So say I wanted to use these variables to say, hey, my name is, and then log the name, and then, hey, my age is this. I can type, hey, my name is, and then say plus name. And then add another plus sign and add another thing saying, and my age is, and then add plus age. You can also see here I made a special note to put spaces between that last word and my quotation mark because, here, let's run this, and you can see that it all looks good right now. If I didn't include these spaces, here, let me show you, then the words and the variables would be sort of like combined together. So you want to make sure you have spaces so things add up. And like say I also wanted to include a period, I have to go like that, plus and then another quotation marks in a period. So yeah, concatenating is basically just adding like multiple different data types together with this plus sign. And this is why console.log 8 plus 1 is different than console.log 8 plus 1. One of them is 9, and you can see it's a number because of the color, and then one of them is the string of 81, because we just combined the two strings, 8 and 1, and you can see that literally interpret it very literally, 8 plus 1, not mathematically. So yeah, be careful about that. I'll leave that up actually. Okay, now so JavaScript has some methods. A method can basically perform a function on like some code. So you guys might not use this often, but let's create a variable called user input, and then let's retrieve something that we type into the terminal and set it to that. So to do this, we can type prompt and then enter what we want the terminal to say before it retrieves this information. So we could prompt the user to enter your favorite color. So let's see what this looks like. Enter your favorite color, and then we have the opportunity to type something. So that, to be honest, you aren't going to use this prompt too often because JavaScript is best with websites. And so in your websites, a lot of times you will be using like a form and retrieving information through that. Like, remember that contact form we made? You would be retrieving information through that, not through the terminal. The terminal is like what developers use. So let's console.log user input. Okay, it's console logging, and now let's perform a method on this user input. So there's multiple predefined methods in JavaScript, and you really just want to look up what you need. So remember how red does not equal red? We can do something where if the user gives capital letters or lower letters, we could set them all to lowercase letters so that we could see if, like, say it's equal to something in our code. Like, say we want to know if their color equals red, print out, oh, so you like the color of roses, and they type in red. Then you wouldn't print that out. So what you have to do is put their user input into lowercase and then compare it if it's equal to red. So let's do this. I'm talking too much. So we can type 2 lowercase and then in parentheses, and then parentheses. So that lets it know it's a method call. So say I typed red. Now you can see it's coming up in lowercase. We could also do 2 uppercase. And you really just want to, you don't have to memorize all these methods because there's a ton, so you really just want to look them up for whatever you need. We can also do a method called trim, and that is basically like, say the user, when they were asked their favorite color, they entered a ton of spaces, like accidentally or something, and then their color. The trim trims that down. It takes off those spaces. So that's important. But I think one of the most common ones is 2 lowercase. Okay. Also, just to point out like another reason why we use variables, say they set their name to this. Say the user set their name to that. Do I really want to type this out every time I reference their name in my site? No, I just want to type name and get whatever they put in. Okay. All right, so now let's talk about functions. So a function is basically so a function can be multiple lines of code that you can store in one name, sort of like a variable, except this is actually performing logical code. So say I wanted to calculate the area of a triangle multiple times in my code. To do that, I have to find the base. I have to find the height, and then I have to multiply that all together. So 1/2 times base times height. And then I want to console.log that area. This is 4 lines of code right here. If I wanted to calculate the area of a triangle multiple times in my program, I do not want to be writing out 4 lines of code multiple times, because there's a core principle in computer science, and it is called DRY. DRY stands for don't repeat yourself. So if you use these 4 lines of code, if you're using them multiple times, what you want to do is wrap this in a function. So we can create the function and call it calc area try. And then this is what function syntax looks like. We have the call, that this is a function, the function name, the parentheses, and then the curly braces, and then our code wrapped inside the curly braces. So now, every time I want to calculate the area of a triangle, I can just call the function like this. Okay? So we use the word function when we're creating a function, and then we just call it with its name. So instead of writing out these 4 lines of code again and again, I can just call the function. So let's call this, let's see what happens. All right, 4, 4, 8. All right, so that worked because 4 times 4 is 16, divided by 2 is 8. All right, now, you know what? Say I want to console.log the area. I'm going to try doing that outside of the function. So I just want to call the function to retrieve all that stuff, calculate the area, and then console.log it outside of the function. Let's see what happens. All right, so we're getting a reference area. Area is not defined. That's sort of weird because right here in our function, we defined var area equals, and then we set its value. What's happening is, since we declared this variable, remember declaration is var area, since we declared it inside the function, we can only reference it inside the function. We have limited its scope, its use of reference, to only within these curly braces. So we can't even reference area outside of the function now, and that kind of stinks because we declared it inside, and we should still be able to use it. So if you guys can think about what I could do here to fix this, you can, I don't know, maybe pause the video and think about it, or not. So the way to fix this is to declare the variable outside of the function and then reset its value inside of the function, or just initialize its value, because we actually didn't give it a value up here. So we declare it up here and then we initialize it inside. Now that it's declared up there, we should be able to, let's see what happens, run our code. And yeah, it's working because we're logging the area when it's declared outside of the function. Okay, cool. So let's write one more function and let's call it function favorite food. So we have our function syntax right here, function favorite food, parentheses, curly brace, and then inside, let's create a variable food. We could prompt the user to enter your favorite food, and then console.log food. So what happened here is, can anyone figure out why nothing happened with our code? We console.logged food. We set the variable to food. What's happening? We only have created a function. All it's doing is it's getting this variable food. It's not getting its variable food. We've created this function, but we didn't call it anywhere. So since we're not calling the function, it's not performing the action. It's not performing the function. So let's call the function, and then we can see what happens. So remember, when you declare a function, you could set all these values. If you don't call it, it does nothing. Same with a variable. You declare a variable, you could set its value. If you don't call it, you're not going to retrieve it or get it printed. Retrieve it if you, of course, are using prompt or something. And you know what I might do? Okay. All right, so that's printing now. But I'm kind of annoyed. I have to redo all this. Well, this thing is really what's annoying, the base and height. I have to retype in all this stuff. So I can use something called a comment in JavaScript. If you remember comments in CSS and HTML, they're just sort of like, we can look at things we write and code for reference, but they're not going to be taken into account by the compiler. So I have these comments here, which is like it's called a single line comment, and it just is sort of like talking about what we're talking about in these lines of code. We can also create a multi-line comment. So right here, I can type /* and then */. So within right here, all of my code is becoming a comment, and the compiler will no longer take it into account when compiling our code. So you see it goes straight to enter your favorite food. And you can see it's also obviously a different color, helping you know it's a comment. Okay, so this is pretty basic. This is sort of what we did before in the area, but a little more complicated. Like in the area, it was more complicated. So let's make this different. Say, instead of retrieving the food variable from the user, I want to retrieve it from the function call. So if I'm calling this function multiple times, maybe this time I want to say their favorite food is pizza. So I'm going to take out var food, and let's just see what will happen when I run this code. Food's not defined. Why is food not defined? In here, I put the favorite food, the food. It doesn't know that this is the food that I'm referencing. So I can add something called a parameter to my function. I can add the parameter food, and then when I call the function with the parameter of the food, it understands that food here equals this, which is food here, and then it can console.log food. Pizza. So I didn't have to type in, I was like prepared to do a prompt, but I don't have to type in anything because inside my function call, I defined what food was. And I made sure to put the food parameter. So yeah, that is it for today and the introduction to JavaScript. I'm gonna uncomment my code. And I think I have this code posted in the JavaScript channel if you wanna look at it. But thank you everyone for listening. Hope you sort of understand functions and variables and stuff like that. These are pretty core principles in JavaScript, but if you don't understand, it is totally fine and common. People really struggle with JavaScript because it's just such a different concept from a ton of other, what you've been doing your whole life. So feel free to ask for help in the channels and DM me. And yeah, alright, so I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.